When I was a little girl, I used to love fairy tales. Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, it was my favorite. I was always encouraged how they would take something so broken and it would end up so beautiful. Well, as I've gotten older, I've come to realize life is not a fairy tale at all. It's very real. But you know, God can take our brokenness and He can make something so very beautiful. So join me as we explore chapter by chapter stories of faith, determination, and courage of people that you may very well know. You may not think you do, but we all have a story to tell.
My name is Jennifer Travis, and this is my story. When I was growing up, I was born and raised here in Crittenden County, and I lived with my mom and my dad and my sister. I'm actually the youngest of 6 children, 7, because I'm the only one between my mom and my dad. My dad was significantly older than my mom, so they met, and they each had previous relationships before. So they were all older than me, so basically I felt like I just had one sibling growing up. The other one's more, I would say a relationship was more like an aunt or uncle, just because they were so much older than me. When I was 8 or 9, my parents divorced, and that was something that was kind of hard for me. I was really a big daddy's girl, so I went and lived with my mom. We actually ended up just living down the street from each other, so I still got to see my dad a lot. I spent a lot of time on the weekends with my grandparents on my dad's side, and that's who I went to church with a lot. I went to church pretty much every weekend with them. We went to church at Caldwell Springs Baptist Church in Francis, and that's, where I learned about God. I would say that probably as a child I didn't listen a lot during the sermons. The most I got out of it was out of Sunday school. I had a lot of good teachers throughout my years there, and that's where I would say I learned the most. I was saved there, and I think I was probably 10 years old. I don't know that I really at that time understood exactly what that meant. I knew I believed in God and I wanted to go to heaven, but I don't think in my mind I really knew exactly what I was doing. But so when I was 12, my father passed away, and that was a really difficult time for me. I didn't really know how to deal with that, I guess, and so I didn't deal with it. I just kind of bottled it up. I didn't talk to anyone about it. To me, if I didn't talk about it, it didn't happen. So I spent a lot of years just carrying that around and not knowing what to do with it. And so going into my teenage years, my mom, she was single and she was having to work a lot. She often had 2 jobs, and so that left me with a lot of time on my hands to, often get into things that I shouldn't be doing. I often looked to men as like a way to seek comfort, I guess, that I was looking for. And looking back at that now, I realized that, I was seeking something that I couldn't get from something in this world. But at the time, I didn't really realize what I was doing. I was just hurting and empty and searching for something to fulfill me. As far as drugs or anything, I never really had, I would say, an addiction. I kind of dabbled in some things there for a little bit. I was hanging around some people that were doing things, and I was easily talked into trying things. So it was just a handful of times, but I'm thankful that it happened the way it did. As I tried something that someone talked me into, and I had a really bad experience. And in my head, I don't know if it was as bad as what I thought it was, but I thought I was going to die. I had about 48 hours after taking this drug that I was experiencing some horrible symptoms. My heart was, just going in and out of rhythm and beating fast, and I was seeing things, and it was very scary. I can remember sitting in my bedroom at my house and seeing what I thought was just demonic things coming out of the wall, and I can just remember praying and calling out to God, and if you'll take this away and make this be normal, I'll never do it again. And he did. He took it away, and I've never had a desire to do anything like that again. So I am thankful that that happened, because had it not, it could have went in a very different way. So in my high school years, even though I had given my life to God, I wasn't really living for God at that time. I was just kind of doing what I wanted to do, trying to do things my way, figure things out my way. And that continued on through, when I graduated, I started college, and I initially went to Murray State. I only stayed there one semester. I was going to go into nursing, and I figured out really fast I wasn't really ready to put into that what you have to. So I stayed and I finished my classes, but I decided to come back and go to community college. So at that time, I was 19. I moved to Paducah. I met a girl that was in one of my classes, and she was looking for a roommate, so we moved in together, and I worked full time, and I went to college classes, and I lived normal through the week, but we lived for the weekend, and we went out and partied every weekend, and God really watched over me through that too, because I put myself in some situations where I never really drove drunk, but I would get in the car with people who had been drinking, and so I'm very blessed that, I was never hurt, or no one else was ever hurt in that. But when I was 22, I met my oldest son's father, and we dated for a while, and I got pregnant, and so I had my first child when I was 23, and of course I wasn't married, so that was the time when I decided, I'm going to grow up. I'm not going to be doing any of this nonsense anymore. I'm responsible for someone else, and being a mother has been the biggest blessing to me, because it just really turned my life around. My boys are everything, so that what has kept me grounded, being there for them, and wanting them to have the best life. After I had my first child, I got more serious about school, and I went back to nursing school and finished that. And in my last semester of nursing school, I got pregnant with my second child and had him shortly after I graduated. At that point, I still was not married. About a year later, I got married, and the first probably 2 years of that was not great, but not horrible. But I think I knew all along before I got married that it really wasn't the right thing to do. We had been on again, off again, and there was just lots of issues. He was unfaithful, and I would forgive him, and we would get back together and go back and forth. And I think I knew that it wasn't right, but I didn't pray on it. I didn't, I thought I can change him. I can make this work, because I felt like that was what was best to do, for my kids. About 2 years into our marriage, my husband, got on prescription pain medicine, and that became a really big problem. It was a lot bigger problem than I realized at the time, until it was just out of control. And I begged him to get help, and he didn't want help, and all his money was going to that, and we were fighting, and I just got to the point that I did not want my children to think that this was a normal life, or them to think that what he was doing was okay. So I filed for divorce, and we spent about a year of trying to settle that all out, which we separated and then moved out from each other, and about a year later we were divorced. And so since then, I've just been killing the single mom thing. The biggest thing, I just want them to know they're loved, and I try my best, and I know I fail sometimes as a mother, but that is my biggest goal, is just that they know that they're loved. So throughout the process of my divorce, I ended up starting coming here to Life in Christ. That was around 2013. My best friend, Heather Penn, she's went here for years, and she had invited me several times, and I'd actually been in the process of trying to find a home church, and we had visited several different places and just never really found a place that felt like home. And so I knew initially when I came here something was very different, and I just felt the presence of God here like I'd never felt it before. And just to be honest, when I first started coming here, it was very uncomfortable for me. Probably the first year I came here was very uncomfortable for me, but I liked the feeling that I felt, and I wanted more of that, and so I continued to push through that and continue to come. I wanted my boys to be in a church that had youth and they could be active in that. And that was just, everything was here and I just felt like this is where we needed to be. But I grew up in a church where, there might be 30 people on any given Sunday. So that was the first thing that made me uncomfortable, because there was a lot more than 30 people here. And I grew up where there was no lifting hands or shouting or anything like that to worship. And so that was just something that was different. I wasn't afraid by it, but it was just different and something I had to adjust to. In, I think, 2014, I rededicated my life. I talked to Sue a lot about just where my life was and how I needed to, follow what God wanted for my life and put Him first so that I could, fulfill my purpose and do what I needed to do for my children. So one of the things here that's really helped me was going through our freedom class. That was, I think, a 12-week class where you meet once a week, and that was just really beneficial to me. I learned a lot about myself that I really didn't even realize. There's talks a lot about freedom and strongholds and things that hold you back, and I think I uncovered a lot of things that I didn't even realize that I was still, holding on to or was holding me back. And another great part of that was just it was something else that kind of took me out of my comfort zone, just talking within that group about personal things, and it helped me develop some relationships with people in the church that I probably would not have otherwise developed relationships with. So it gave me some close friends that I know I can rely on. And at the end of the class, all the classes come together and have a freedom conference, and that was like a 2-day thing on the weekend. And during that, you hear different people's testimonies, and we praise and worship. And I remember specifically one thing that they had us do is we had to write a list of things that we wanted to let go of. And you just go up to the front and you drop it at the foot of the cross, and it's done, and you just let it go. And that was so liberating to me, just to be able to just say, I'm done with this. I'm not going to hold on to it anymore. I'm giving it to God, and lift that off of me. So if you haven't been through Freedom Class, I would highly recommend it. It's just a wonderful class where you learn, and I just did a lot of healing that I didn't even know that I needed to do. Just brought up a lot of stuff within me that I was able to let go of and move on, and So what has really helped me by coming here to Life in Christ is it's just a really strong foundation of faith teaching, no matter who that be that is on preaching at the moment. Faith is really taught here, and my faith has tremendously grown since I've been coming here. And one of my favorite things that Pastor Chris says is, you can doubt and do without, or you can believe and receive. And I remember the first time I heard him say that, I wrote it down in my notebook where I take notes, and I often look back at that, and I actually used to have it written down and hung on my wall in my office. And it's just something that, it's just a true statement. If you have full faith, there's no room for doubt. And I feel like that doubt can block a blessing. And so that is just something that I've really grown in here by continually hearing words about growing in faith and really knowing how to apply that, because it was something that I probably didn't have. I knew about faith, but I would often try to do things on my own. I would pray about it, but I still worried about it. So I've really learned how to give things over to God and just let Him deal with it. Another teaching here that has really helped me is Pastor Chris and Pastor Sue often talk about renewing your mind to the Word of God. And that has been a big process. That is something that when you have thought one way your whole life, it's very hard to change. You have to make a daily decision to, I'm not going to think this way. And so it's something that, you've got to choose to do. And it's something I still fall short on. I try and I'll do really good, but I can just say, I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect, and I'm not always pleased with everything that comes out of my mouth, but I've just got to, ask for forgiveness and move on and continue to try to do my best each day. So that process is just a day-to-day living it out. It affects the way I choose to speak to my children. It affects the way I choose to speak to people I work with. my family, and it's just, and I can tend to be negative and mostly of myself, and so that is something that I have to work on and just redirect my thoughts. If I could go back and talk to a younger version of me or talk to someone with a similar story, I would just want them to know that you don't have to do things in a particular order. It's nice to do things in the right order, but if you fall out of line and do things a little backwards, it doesn't mean that God doesn't love you, God doesn't have a purpose for your life, and that you can live that purpose out. You just have to start where you're at. It doesn't matter where you've been. You just start where you're at and put God first and keep going from there, and that's what really matters. My name is Jennifer Travis, and that was my story.